Welcome back, and today we're talking about a story out of Luke. The Gospel of Luke was written by the physician Luke. It was one of two books he wrote in the Christian Testament. It was colloquially known as the New Testament in the Bible the Christian church uses. It's the shorter chunk of the Bible. It's about 27 books, 26 books. And Luke is trying to write down an orderly account of the history as he could come to understand it. The story comes shortly after Jesus' time in the wilderness, 40 days, which just means anthropologically a lotta, that reflects back on the time the nation of Israel spent wandering after the Exodus when they were saved from slavery. This story brings us to Jesus' hometown. For those who may not know, Jesus was born out of wedlock. Mary and Joseph were betrothed when Mary was with child. We may have a discussion about that later on. So there was a lot of scandal and gossip going around about the baby Jesus, and then about the life he had being from a laborer's family and now being a traveling teacher. So in chapter 4, verse 16 to 30, we get this story. And listen close, because I don't think you'll hear what you think you should be hearing. So when he came to Nazareth, there he had been brought up. He went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release of the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, and let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him, were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, though, "Is not this Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself,' and you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown. Things we have heard you did at Capernaum.' He said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's town.' But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah. And when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land, yet Elijah was sent to none of them, except the widow of Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, except for Naaman and the Syrian." When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of the town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so they might hurl him off the cliff. But they passed through the midst of them and went on his way. There's a couple interesting things going on here. One is Jesus is very much confronting the established religious oppressive authorities that were controlled by the Romans to keep the masses in check, with a look in the mirror moment. You're wanting this to happen now. Our history is that it doesn't happen. Why not? That's one of the questions that Jesus pertains. It's a good question for us now too, at the end of Christendom, and where churches are being basically put back to where we were meant to be, as part of a soul of a community or any organization or nonprofit. Why have we veered so far away from our simple mission of care for neighbor, care for self? That was the first thing that Jesus challenged. And he challenged it very astutely using Elijah and Elisha, two major prophets of the nation of Israel before the exiles and such. The other piece being is people are going, well, why wouldn't he do these miracles to prove them wrong? Well, I think part of it is we've misunderstood this. We take this as being that, leaders or people called into ministry should not expect to be able to serve those congregations, those communities they were called from. That's wrong. Let's be honest. Sometimes people who know the communities the best are those that grew up in them and have been around them their whole lives. Yes, they may be blinded a bit by their own rose-colored glasses on things that may or may not be real, or overlooking things that may need fixing or encouraging. That's where you build a good team around you, just like Jesus had done with calling his 12 disciples originally, and then those are the men. And throughout the Gospels, you'll see the women that come alongside him as well in equal roles of leadership and ministry. What else also happens, though, is this was the moment where Jesus got to look back on his hometown and go, wait a minute, the values you're espousing and wanting to hold to aren't my core values. I challenge you to get back to the core values you always taught me that you held, yet you are refusing. So much so you're actually trying to throw him off a cliff. He escapes from that, much to their shock. A miracle happens and he actually passes through their hands and vanishes. But really, I think it's a challenge to us too in our own vocational lives, whether it's a career or a job. Why are we there? Is it just for the paycheck? If it's just for the paycheck, that's fine. There's jobs like that happen. As a freelance writer, I held different jobs so I could focus on my writing. And I knew that was the purpose of the job, was to make money. But yet there's other pieces, intrinsic pieces that kept me there. That would usually be co-workers, customers, things like that. But the core piece of why I was there was it allowed me time to write, allowed me time to go to school, to grow, to learn. Those pieces. If it's your actual vocational career, you feel like this is your purpose in life, then it really is finding that group, that organization in which your core values mesh. If they're no longer meshing, even with no matter how much time you have in, that's when you have to have that look in the mirror moment where Jesus gave the people of his hometown and going, you say this about Elijah and Elisha, you say this should happen, you say these miracles should happen, you say I should do this, but why aren't you? We have stated these are our values. We have stated this is what we believe in. For the nation of Israel, Jesus reflected several times in his teachings. Love God with your everything and love your neighbor as yourself. Loving God with everything and neighbor as yourself isn't a hierarchical commandments, it's a circle. And basically, by looping through, as we know, the circle gets completed and you're loving our holy mystery creator because you are showing that compassion to your neighbor and to yourself. You're being kind to yourself and making sure that things you're doing are lining up with that which you believe and your values in which you have. It can be hard, but if you come to a point in a crossroads where your values are no longer in sync with whether you're attending, a member of a community, a member of a church, a job, a career, even a vocation, it becomes time of discernment, time to pause and reflect and go, is this really where I'm meant to be? Or what are my core principles, my core values, my non-negotiables? Because we can always find things that we can use as a non-negotiable. What are our authentic non-negotiables that are no longer aligning here? And if that's the case, those 2 or 3 non-negotiables in your life, then it is time to move on. And the question becomes, where to next? Where is my journey taking me? When Jesus left the wilderness, he wasn't expecting, he didn't know where he was going, but he wound up right back in his hometown. He was probably excited. I mean, think about it, hometown guy. You're allowed to speak at the synagogue. You're reading the reading for the day. You're allowed to teach. It's almost like they're honoring you. But then he clicks and he goes, no, this is like the greatest practical joke ever. You're setting me up here. This isn't what it's meant to be. And we have those moments in our own lives. And so the question then becomes, when we have that epiphany like Jesus had here, what's next? Where is your life journey taking you in a place in which you're truly living out the true you and that holy love that created you and that you live out of?